Okay, so again, I'm Stephanie Potts, and I work with Midwest Christian Outreach. So I partner with John and Corky and all those guys. And as the handouts show, obviously going to be talking about anime and what it's doing to our kids, how it's hypersexualizing our children, and how cults have actually used anime as recruiting tools in the past to try to get people, especially young people, to join their groups. So we're going to discuss a lot about that. And one thing to know about the handout is that there's a lot of links to articles and documentation and the actual anime videos in the digital form. So if you want the digital form, you can go to this little bit.ly address here online, type it into the URL address, and all the links to the different documents and the research that I've done is all there, so you can take a look at it for yourself. And I would highly recommend, for those of you who have children and people that are watching anime, I would go to at least the first half of this presentation and get familiar with what is on average everyday anime and how it's sexualizing your children. So since this is a small group, I'd like to get an idea as to what made you interested in this particular talk. You said you had a granddaughter.
Yeah, my granddaughter, she's got her iPhone and she looks at YouTube stuff, and some of the stuff that I've seen her watch is just like, I tell her to stop watching it just because it's so weird. It's not a cartoon, but it's just like people doing just like everyday stuff, and she's watching. I'm thinking, I told her, I said, you could do better at this than they're doing. I don't know why you're doing it. And with the cartoon thing, some of the stuff I watched, and I wasn't getting. It just looked like a natural cartoon, it was about a group of kids and they had powers. Well, that maybe seemed kind of weird, but I'm thinking back to Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck sort of things.
Yeah, that's what I thought
my
too.
favorites.
Well, I grew up on that stuff, and I'm not, violent or gay or whatever. They say these cartoons put up. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, it'll shock you. I didn't know anything. I thought it was the same thing. I thought it was like, oh, it's just cartoons, no big deal. And I work in my church. I work with the youth group, middle school and high schoolers, and I noticed that a lot of kids were interested in this, but I didn't make anything of it until the pastor had said something to me, saying, "You need to look into this." I have been learning a little bit about anime and just how dangerous it is, and I need you to put a presentation together for the parents so that they are aware of what their children are watching. So, how about you?
My son accepted Christ at an early age and just went through Wheaton Academy. He was in the public school until high school, and just said, I just don't fit in. Can I go to Wheaton Academy? Had heard about it, had known some friends that went there, and so we struggled through the money and got him through. And strong, devout Christian, he was very strong. He used to tell me things that I was blown away by being a Christian. And anyway, got married, and I questioned his choice, and there's still questions. Ever since he's been married, he's gotten into this, he's always had an interest in Japan and Japanese stuff. He took Japanese in college, but then he got into this stuff, this anime stuff, and I think he's allowing it, well, I know he's allowing his children to watch some things. his wife got a lizard, or one of those lizard things, reptile things, and she calls him Naruto. You know, and I just saw
Okay.
Naruto here.
Yeah.
And I don't know. She claims to be a Christian, but I just don't know what's going on. And I thought this
Have
would
you
help
seen
me.
them kind of move away from their faith a bit, or?
Ever since he was married, my son has moved away.
Oh.
But he had a big trauma. Their first daughter, his wife wanted to give birth in a pool at home. And that happened, and they had to rush her and the daughter to the hospital. She was hemorrhaging, and the baby couldn't breathe. And my son was torn between wife, child, what do I do, where do I go? It was just so traumatic to him. He just seemed to lose some faith there.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
And remind me of your name again.
I'm Debbie.
Debbie. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I will keep your son in my prayers
Matthew.
for that.
His name is Matthew.
Matthew.
And, Betsy.
Matthew and Betsy.
I appreciate that because I do. I'm always on my knees for them. And my son claims to now. He says, I pray. And I said, well, teach your children to pray. They don't read the Bible. She just doesn't think it's important. She is from a family who didn't go to church or stopped going to church. They had an experience and then are not churchgoers. So now they're not churchgoers.
Yeah, that's.
It just seems
that's
like he's
good.
following that family dynamic.
Okay. And Kirby, what was your granddaughter's name?
Savannah.
Savannah. Okay, I'll write that down.
And they have 2 children now.
2 children.
Yeah.
Okay.
6 and 4.
6 and 4. Okay.
So,
Yeah, some of this stuff is directed to kids as that young, and you'd be surprised what's being presented to them at such an early age.
maybe not surprised, but sickened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a small group. I just thought I would ask folks, what interested them in this particular topic. And so my name is Stephanie, obviously, and I was just sharing that I didn't know anything about anime until about 6 months ago.
Oh, okay.
And the reason why I started investigating it is because I work with the youth group at our church, and it's rampant in our youth group. And so our pastor had asked me to do some research into it, to find out exactly what is being taught in these quote-unquote little cutesy cartoons the kids are watching, and what are the other threats that the parents need to be aware of, and put a presentation together for the parents. So that's really what's going on here, and what I'm doing, and I do hope to eventually put a journal article together for the Midwest Christian Outreach Journal. So, because I work with Don and those guys. So, and this is my dad. So,
Hi, I'm Jerry.
Hey, Jerry.
Hey. Nice to meet you, Dave. What church are you at?
Well, I actually live in Dayton, Ohio.
Okay.
So, I'm with the Calvary Chapel movement.
Oh, okay.
Calvary Chapel South Dayton.
Sweet. Okay.
So, yeah. And what had interested you in anime?
Well, I've gone through all. There's a lot of topics in these the workshops, and so what interests me, and I'm curious because that this topic was in here. I just seen this, to be honest with you. The reason why I'm late is I was helping in another classroom do some technology challenges.
Of course,
that they're
we
having in
appreciate
there.
all
I'm
the
like,
music and stuff you're
okay, I'm not
providing.
sure where to go, and I came by here. So, long story short, my daughter is a college student and, shy of any other better word, obsessed with reading these things. She downloads them onto her computer, on her phone, and she's reading it all the time. And my son, who's in 6th grade, enjoys watching the shows, Netflix, and my wife and I have had conversations. I'm like, I get it. These are kind of fantastical type stories, and a lot of stuff. I just I grew up with Speed Racer. That was kind of in it. This is kind of Speed Racer on steroids, right? With all kinds of added stuff. And I never even aligned anime with Speed Racer. I just see the style of the cartoon and go, wow, that looks a lot like I remember growing up watching Speed Racer and so on. So the philosophies that are being, these fantastical superpower type things, we all grew up with wishing what would be your superpower if you could have one, and all this and that. So I'm interested to hear what your research is showing. The thing that we are teaching my son listens to the Bible as he goes to sleep at night. He enjoys that, and it's not that he's weird about anything, but we have small group Bible studies in our house, and he looks forward to sitting in from time to time. He's at our rehearsals for a worship team. I lead the worship ministry at our church in Wonder Lake. I live right down the block from Don.
Okay.
He's I call him my rabbi. I've known him for about 12 years, and just enjoy, just being into his tutelage, if you will, and
that's great.
Learning, but also, we go to the same church together and so on. But so we're cautiously aware of what's going on, reinforcing the main big themes always seem to be the good versus evil.
Yeah.
And we're kind of pointing out that not so much getting into, we're teaching our son. We've already taught, our daughters are older, are basically young adults now. So, and we've laid that foundation of what our faith means, biblically speaking, and we've modeled it to the best of our ability, not just what we do on Sunday mornings, but who we are throughout the week. And I believe our son is seeing that as well. So we're cautious when we'll watch those shows together.
That's good.
And not really, but so I'll stop there.
Yeah.
And just I'm curious to see what your research is showing. And
and my
how
job
I
here.
can be more aware of.
And that's all I'm trying to do here. I'm not trying to tell anybody how to raise their kids or tell them, no, you should never allow your children to watch anime. It's the decision of the parent. They know their kids the best. In your case, the grandchildren, you guys know them the best. I don't know anything about your kids, so I'm just going to give you the tools to be able to make the best decisions on this. So,
Can I ask you, can you put unicorns into this mix at all?
I'm sure there are unicorns in anime. I mean, there's so many different shows out there. I basically have been focusing on the ones that I know the kids in our youth group are watching, and what's being taught in those particular shows. But I'm sure there's other anime out there about unicorns, and that I know would appeal to young girls for sure, and maybe even boys too. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. But let me give you a little background on what is anime. So let's not get confused with anime and manga. They're actually two different things, and I will use those terms interjectly throughout my little talk here. But anime is the particular style of animation that originated in Japan, and it's contrasted with lots of different colors and thematic elements with science fiction and fantasy. It's usually the style that is used for movies and television, whereas manga is what you will see in the anime style comic books. It's what's drawn on paper instead of used in television. So when we talk about the cults and how the cults have used anime to recruit, I will often use the term manga to talk about their comic books. So just FYI on that one. Both anime and Western comics are based in pagan ethics and humanism, and so that's something you definitely need to be aware of. And to give you an idea as to how popular these things are, again, I had no idea. I find anime to be ghastly boring, but a lot of other people love it. So two of the largest websites associated with anime that provide streaming services and that sort of thing is Funimation, as well as Crunchyroll. And just from their YouTube stats alone, Funimation has 3.4 or almost 3.5 million subscribers, and 1.1 billion views from their YouTube stats. So that kind of gives you an idea of how popular this is. Now, granted, that's worldwide, but anime is very, very popular here in America. So, and it's growing to become more popular as we become more interested in Buddhism and Eastern religions and the occult. So, as we continue to move down that track, animation is going to become more and more interesting to young viewers, especially. The other site, Crunchyroll, as you can see, has 585,000 followers and over 25 million views. So, okay, getting into the first part, anime and the sexualization of our children. Couple little notes. Oh, I also wanted to make sure you were aware, Jerry, that the digital version of this is, I have the link to it here, so if you want to type that URL in, you can get the digital version, which has all the links.
Okay.
So a lot of the stuff that's underlined is what has links to different articles and websites and actual animation videos that you can watch. So, but in the gray box, I just wanted to highlight, I haven't watched every single show that these kids watch. There's just not enough time in the day. But the ones that have the star by them are the ones that I've personally have watched a few episodes of. But be aware that the ones that I haven't watched, it is possible that they have elements in them that promote the LGBTQ agenda and other things that we want to keep our kids away from. But this, again, is just my 6 months worth of research. And the other thing to keep in mind is that IMDb does not list parental advisory notices where there are LGBTQ messages. So don't expect to see that on IMDb.
What is IMDb?
It's a website where you can learn about all different forms of television programs and movies and what the background is on them. And they also provide parental warnings. So in the digital version, I have a link for each show that I talk about and the parental warning for each show. So you can go on and read it for yourself.
I've used IMDb for years to check on what movies they're about. If I see a movie listing, to decide whether or not I want to watch it. I just go on the IMDb site and bring up the information.
Yeah.
What does IMDb stand for?
I knew you were going to ask that question, and I don't know.
Okay, I'm
I
sorry.
don't know either. I use it all the time, but I haven't.
I'm going to make a note.
IMBD.
Yeah, IMDb.
DB.
Yeah.
How about International Movie Database?
That could very well.
That sound. We'll go with that.
Wow.
So.
Making that up.
Yeah. Okay.
So, okay, so these are some of the shows that I know the kids are watching, or have friends who are watching. Probably the worst one is Food Wars. You would think, oh, it's about cooking. It's a cooking show. No, it's pornography. And it's actually marketed as TV-14. So kids as young as 14 are being told to watch this show, and there's frequent nudity. They're being, so there's actually articles out there on, so if you flip over to the next page, where
I'm sorry if I'm going ahead.
Oh no, that's okay. In the other little gray box section, number 2, it says, watch out for articles like this. Fandom.com is promoting anime pornography to your children. And again, there's a link to an article here, 5 anime you should not watch with your parents. One of the ones that's listed is Food Wars.
Wow.
And the reason why, even though it's listed as TV-14, is there's frequent nudity, periodic graphic nudity, full frontal nudity. Yes, it's in cartoon format, but still. They have orgasms as well as mild profanity in the show. And this is all listed on the IMDb website, so I haven't even watched the show. I think that one I'm not even willing to turn on because it's just too disgusting. But I know our kids are watching it.
I could understand why they want the kids not to watch it with their parents.
Yeah. So, but these
Parents
websites are encouraging your children to watch these shows and specifically not to watch them with their parents. So,
Flag.
yeah.
Bing.
Yeah. So watch out for those types of articles. Another one is Dragon Ball. Now there's different series of Dragon Ball. The most recent ones are not as bad, but the classic Dragon Ball from the 80s is TVY 7. So it's even younger. It's promoted to children as young as 7, and yet it has full frontal male nudity in it. And Sailor Moon, it promotes a lot of Buddhism, or not Buddhism, but Shintoism. And I make a note of Shinto Miko priestesses, which are temple priestesses. Now, I don't get into too much detail as yet, because I still need to do some research into this, but temple priestesses are usually temple prostitutes. But I don't know if they necessarily promote that in the show because I haven't watched it. But it was a little red flag when I saw that, so that's something I need to look into. But they do promote transgenderism, it has some homosexual undertones, mild language. And the very last episode of Sailor Moon was completely non-censored. At least the non-censored version of it was, one of their main characters was completely naked throughout most of the episode. And again, this one is marketed to children. So now Naruto, that's a big one. That's very popular.
I think that's the one that my son and my daughter.
Yeah, and pretty much all the kids who are really, really into anime are watching Naruto as well. I'll put it this way: of the ones that I have watched, Naruto was the least boring, the least boring of the ones that I've watched. But it has very strong Buddhist themes to it, as well as animism, transgender undertones, homosexual undertones, and mild profanity. I have a link to the hand chakras that are used by Naruto, the character. So he's going through ninja school, and he's learning how to be a perfect ninja within Buddhism. And so he's using all these different hand chakras, which are guiding divine energy into him in order to become the best ninja. And when you get on social media and you see what these kids are posting, they're posting their own, hand chakras. So they're being desensitized to this.
Is this one term that I've watched some of these with my son, airbender? That's part of this Naruto thing, right?
I think so. Again, I haven't gone far into it, but I have heard that, and yes, I believe it is.
I think this airbender is aligning with these what did you call them?
Chakras.
Chakras.
Yeah.
That call out specific superpowers. I'm going to call it that.
Yeah.
Because they kind of present it in that way. They're not really telling you that this is a Buddhist thing.
Yeah.
But, so they're disguising it as a fantastical way of calling out certain superpowers.
I don't know how much you guys know about Buddhism, but basically chakras are believed to be energy centers within your body. And oftentimes when I go to New Age fairs, they're talking about balancing your chakras and keeping your chakras imbalanced in order to maintain health, wealth, and prosperity. But what's interesting here is in this particular anime, they're using hand chakras, which are, again, doing the same thing, balancing the energies in your system, in your body, in order to tap into divine energy to become the best ninja that you can. Again, it's just a lot of desensitization of our kids to Buddhist as well as occultic ideas. And
Can you briefly, animism?
so animism would be like giving a divine quality to everything in nature.
Okay.
So it would be like this water has a spirit in it. This book has a spirit in it.
Okay.
This has several.
Yeah, each one of the little spikes has its own individual spirit. That would be animism.
Thank you.
Yep. And
I
then
find it intriguing that they indicate that these allow themselves to have full frontal nudity, LGBTQ stuff, but they restrict themselves to only mild
profanity.
profanity. That's intriguing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It would seem to me that the profanity is something that they want you to kind of feel moral about. Okay, we got to be careful how we talk, but they make a delineation when it comes to the alphabet soup concerns to make it less profane. They're, like you said, desensitizing you to LGBTQ, XYZ, desensitizing that and making it less offensive.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be offended by this. This is normal. That's they want you to
exactly.
believe
They want to
that.
normalize all this.
Yes.
And I'm going to just skip down to the box again here. We already discussed point number 2, but point number 1, be very careful about what your kids are looking at on social media. For instance, shows like Naruto may not have like blatant homosexuality in it. It has undertones. But a lot of times what the LGBTQ community will often do is they will make their own version of anime and they make it into an art form. So a lot of times they'll put posts out onto social media, and these types of posts are called shipping posts. Why they call it shipping, I don't know, but what they do is they take different characters of the show and they'll put 2 male characters together in a homosexual relationship and create art online. And then if you're on Instagram or Facebook or anywhere and you're looking at, you want to be following anything related to Naruto or any of these shows, you're going to get completely overloaded with this LGBTQ shipping images. It's everywhere. And
if you do a search for Naruto on Facebook,
you'll probably get a ton of LGBTQ stuff.
really?
Yeah. Because that's what they do. They put this quote-unquote shipping art together. Again, I don't know why they call it shipping, but that's what they do. So just be aware of that too.
Thank you.
So I guess, what's the ultimate end point of this?
Desensitizing.
Again, desensitizing your children and normalizing, perverted behavior, getting them to embrace the occult, which I haven't even gotten a chance to really dive into. There's in these books that I have here, they talk about the occult, but I haven't really gotten a chance to dive into the specific anime that gets deep into witchcraft and spells and things like that, but it does get into it. I just haven't gotten there yet.
So because I'm thinking back, and so when I watch cartoons, it was to get you to buy maybe a particular cereal or a particular, get the prize that's in the box, whatever. But to make something to go towards demonic is mind-boggling.
Yeah. It's crazy.
It is scary. It seems to me like in today, cause like you, I grew up on cartoons, right? I grew up on
most
Tom
kids
and
did.
Jerry and Bugs Bunny, and all Saturday morning cartoons of all sorts and kinds, and Superman and Batman and the superpowers and Spider-Man, all that, and pretending to have those as a kid with my brothers and friends.
Yeah.
We would do all those things. It would never take them to the level of we can be this one day, and or kind of adopt whatever philosophies were somehow ingrained. But today,
Right.
I watch some of the cartoons. We're actively involved. I think that's the biggest thing, is that as a parent, to be actively involved with your kids and just don't blindly throw things at them.
Yeah.
Be there and watch them with them. But the hard part for me is I can't watch it because I see the agenda.
Yeah.
There's this subliminal message in every form of media out there that aligns with stuff we just heard about, and these promotions and desensitizing of all of these things that it just stands out to me. Like, I see it all over the place, even in the commercials between the cartoons.
Yeah.
It's all in there, in the way that they show the toys of the commercials, and even the cereal commercials, and everything else in between. It's like,
Yeah.
So I wonder if the agenda was there when we were watching cartoons,
see, and I just
or
don't know.
maybe.
I think to some degree a little bit, because if you look at the comics today, American comics, most of it is based upon European paganism, and so like Thor is the Norse god of thunder, and
Sure.
so there's so many pagan gods within American comics, and you also look at shows and cartoons and things like X-Men. That's teaching evolution. It's teaching that we're evolving into greater beings.
Yes.
And whereas science is actually showing that we're de-evolving, our DNA is breaking down, which is more aligned with a biblical worldview. But I think, from the beginning, a lot of these cartoons, they were obviously not as brazen as they are today, but you show paganism in any way, shape, or form, you're desensitizing children to it. So, and I think by shows like X-Men, you don't even realize that you're teaching your kids evolution when they're watching that stuff.
Well, the good thing about my only responses I'm hearing you on that is that, at least in my home and the kids that we spend our time around, we're teaching them the truth.
Yeah.
They're hearing the gospel, so they have something to compare against.
Right.
Yes.
In contrast, that
I think
kinda
that's
goes,
great.
Well,
That's how it
what
should
is
be
the
done.
Bible? The Bible says this, but they're saying this. Why
Yeah.
is that different? And then we can have the conversation.
Yeah, I think it's important if you do watch it together.
Yeah.
Because at the church school that we have, they study Shakespeare, they study communism, they study everything, but they look at it through the lens of a Christian worldview, and they analyze it. So I think that if you're gonna watch some of this stuff, watch it as a family and say, how do we respond to this as Christians? What do we see wrong, and how does this contrast with a biblical worldview? To me, I think that would make your kids even more fascinated, but fascinated in a way, in an apologetic way, of being able to say, "Oh, this stuff is just crazy," and actually be able to talk with their friends about the problems, the logical problems in some of these shows, and actually maybe be an apologetic tool for God with their friends, which would be really cool.
But
So
if they're not getting that Christian biblical worldview,
They have nothing
not
to
even,
compare against.
not most of the kids are not getting it at home. They're certainly not getting it at their public school, and even their Christian schools, unfortunately, are not teaching a full Christian worldview. They may have chapel on Wednesdays and a little bit of religion class, but they're not teaching how to respond to culture with a Christian worldview. So,
respond to culture.
So I'm going to skip over to part 2 because we're running a little low in time, and I don't want to keep you guys from your lunch. But so one of the things that I wanted to find out is how it's being used as cults, as a cult recruiting tool. And so these particular books talk a bit about that, especially this one here. So if you feel free to take a picture of it afterwards if you're interested in reading more. But this particular book talks about how the cult Shinrikyo, which was the Japanese cult back in the 80s and 90s. These were the folks that bombed the Tokyo subway system with the sarin gas attack back, like, in, I think it was 91. I can't remember. It was sometime in the 90s. Really, really nasty cult. The leader of that cult, he was very much influenced by anime, as well as manga, the written cartoons. And he was specifically interested in cartoons that had a focus on apocalyptic ideas and so apocalyptic settings, and the cult or veneration of protagonists who bring about reconciliation through their moral fortitude. In addition to the obvious influence of Japan's direct experience of the atomic bombing, the popularity of academic themes in manga has its roots in a boom in millennial thought in Japan that was promoted by a journalist named Gato Ben, and his translations of Nostradamus' prophetic writings. So a lot of this stuff went into this cult, and the founder of the cult, I cannot remember his name right off the top of my head. Right here, Shoko Ashara. He was influenced by apocalyptic messages of specifically of the Nausicaa of the Valley Wind manga, which was also redubbed and created into a Disney movie, by the way. Lovely Disney. And I'm sporting my Minnie Mouse purse, which I think is funny, but and so he created his own anime. What's scary is that it's still available on YouTube. You can the link here in the first point will send you to the Shinrikyo anime that was used to recruit people into the cult. And the anime that they produced drew upon esoteric Buddhism, Tantra, yoga, and messianic and eschatological elements of Christianity, interestingly enough. And according to this particular comic book, this Mitsubo no Hi comic book, everyone except Om members would die during the destruction of this world by the Shiva deity. Again, that gets into Hinduism and Buddhism. In this apocalyptic, obsession that they had, and they would speak about the Armageddon and that it was a good idea for Ashara before the approaching millennium in 2000. I think that's why he bombed the Tokyo subway in the 90s, because he was getting ready for the millennium and he thought the world was going to come to an end, and so. He was very sick in the head, and so here was his plea at the end of his comic book series, or his manga series, where he says, "My plan for salvation unfortunately falls a fraction behind each year. This is because my elite disciples from previous lives are still fixated upon the present world and have not yet realized the mission for which they were born. Without delay, they should recognize that this world is an illusion," that's Buddhism, "and gather under me. If all of them could gather and combine their strength, I'm sure that the delay in salvation up until now could be recovered. I want them to come to me quickly. I want them to lend their strength to my salvation movement. After all, more than anything else, their mission is salvation." So they're appealing to this. There was a lot of times back in the 90s, especially, there was almost a pushback in Japan against the modernism of Japan, against the technology, and they saw their culture just completely transitioning away from the way it used to be in the ancient Japanese Empire and in Shintoism. So he appealed to some of these people who wanted to move away from that and brought them into his cult by appealing to their fortitude, their moral fortitude, and their willingness to want to change things in Japan. So I'm going to jump over to a different group now. Om Shamriko was obviously a very dangerous cult, very violent cult. But there's in my opinion, a different type of cult out there now, and it's really the cult of climate change. They're not as blatantly violent, but I think within time they eventually will, because they look at the human race as a parasite to the world. So one group I wanted to talk about is Soka Gakkai International, and we talk about it a lot in this book. We also talk about it a little bit in this one. But Soka Gakkai International, it's using anime to radicalize children in favor of climate change action.
Can I ask where you are? Soka Gakkai. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay.
So are you there now?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So a little information on Soka Gakkai. It's listed as a cult by International Counter Cult Ministries. Again, the link will be in the digital version. It has 8.2 million members in Japan and 2.2 million members outside of Japan, and 352,000 practicing members here in America. And it's considered a cult, so just think about that. It was originally affiliated with the Nichiren Buddhist sect, but was excommunicated in 1991 because Soka Gakkai, the third president of Soka Gakkai, Daisaku Ikeda, he didn't believe in the authority of the priesthood, of the Nichiren priesthood. So it's kind of like he would be considered the John Calvin of Nichiren Buddhism. John Calvin denied the authority of Catholic priests, and so look at him in that respect. So he was thrown out of the Buddhist sect. But from what I understand about Soka Gakkai, is that it's a prosperity gospel cult. It's very much like the Word of Faith movement here in America. If you give money to the church, you will be healthy and wealthy, and everything will be great. And you must have lots and lots of faith in order to be successful. And if you don't have success and money in your life, well, then you're not being a good Buddhist. You're not being a good Soka Gakkai Buddhist. So these folks will chant literally for 5 hours a day.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
And the BBC did a presentation, which I'm linked to. I think it's in here somewhere. They did a documentary on this back in the 90s on this group, and just how they use mind control, and again, just chanting for 5 hours a day. That would set your mind open to demonic influences. The scary thing is that in 1964, the Clean Government Party, or Komeito, was formed by Daisaku Ikeda, the third president of Soka Gakkai, and it's one of the most powerful political parties, if not the most powerful political party in Japan. So here it is. It's a known cult. They have millions of members throughout the world, and they're the most powerful political party in Japan. And I'll tell you why this is important here in a minute. They produce their own anime, and we'll talk about the specific cartoons. But they have 55,000 followers just for their children's cartoons, and the messages that are sent. I'm going to kind of skip down since we're short on time here, but the LA Times has reported on Daisaku Ikeda as being a very enigmatic and scary guy, based upon numerous reports out of Japan. The Dalai Lama, however, considers him to be one of the most influential spiritual leaders. Now, Soka Gakkai International and Daisaku Ikeda is very involved with the United Nations and their climate change action initiatives. He's put together movies and films for different United Nations events, such as the where did it go? The Rio Earth Summit back in 1992. He has a consultative status with the United Nations, and again, they promote humanism and Buddhism at a global level. And they also are working to build UNESCO schools. UNESCO is another United Nations organization. UNESCO was, if I recall correctly, founded by a guy named Robert Muller, who was very much into Buddhism and the occult. And most of what he believes about climate change is based from channeling spirits and occultic experiences. So,
Well, that's reliable, huh?
yeah. So Soka Gakkai is very much involved in the United Nations and educating youth around the world in Buddhist principles and climate change action. So, all right. They also have a university here in America, in California, and the U.S. News and World Report rated it as one of the top colleges in 2015. It was the top 5 in the best value in ethnic diversity among national liberal arts colleges. So they have a very strong presence here in America. They have usually have associated groups within college campuses and major cities where they also provide educational events. And what's also interesting is that this Daisaku Ikeda gentleman is very much involved with the Club of Rome. And the Club of Rome is really the group that got this whole climate change nonsense off the ground. And I do mean nonsense because they themselves called it nonsense. So Alexander King and Bertrand Schneider, who were the founder and secretary general of the Club of Rome, they themselves said that in searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution and the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine and the like would fit the bill. So we're right here. I'm not sure if you got lost there or not, but they came up with the idea of climate change to create a way for the world to become united in one effort. You know, during wartime, the country will unite together against a common enemy, right? So they confess to coming up with the idea of climate change, and Soka Gakkai International is very much associated with the Club of Rome. He's written books with members of the Club of Rome on this very issue of climate change and how to make economic changes, i.e. socialism, in order to implement climate change action. Now, getting back to anime, if you want to go over to the section, it's the second to last page, where it talks about Daisaku Ikeda and his apologetic anime. Analysis of 3 out of 17 English videos. So I watched 3 of the 17 English videos that he has on his YouTube site, again, where there's 55,000 followers. And the first one, The Prince and the Coral Sea, promotes hatred of Shinto feudalism. Hey, Don. And it basically blames Shintoism, interestingly enough, for climate irresponsibility and ecological disasters that have gone on in Japan. So he hated Shintoism. Daisaku Ikeda hates Shintoism. That's part of the reason why the Japanese government finds him to be a very dangerous person. And one of the common themes you will notice in a lot of his anime is, especially ones that associate with climate change, he is telling children that they must be willing to die for the sake of the environment, and that if you do this, you will be reincarnated as a more enlightened being. So, this type of anime is being taught around the world. It's being used as an educational tool for young children to learn about climate change and how we need to have a global effort at fighting against despotism. I think Corey was talking about that earlier, about how they look at social justice and globalism and all climate change as capitalist, imperialist despotism, and so this anime that Soka Gakkai is putting out is promoting that narrative to young children. And so the next one down, the two princes promotes a communitarianism via the priesthood of all SGI members. Again, since Daisaku Ikeda didn't agree with the authority of the priests, he, like Calvin, believed in the priesthood of the believer, of the Buddhist believer. That's very appealing to the average person in Japan. I can be as influential and powerful as a priest. So he uses that to also promote communitarianism and focus on the community, focus on the state, statism, the state knows best, the community knows best, there's no individuality. And you must be, again, willing to die for the sake of the Buddhist community. And you will be reincarnated as a more enlightened being. Now I gotta be fair, not all of his cartoons, I did watch a couple other ones that aren't as bad. So I'm gonna be fair. But these are the ones that really stood out to me that I was blown away by. Another one, Rainbow Mountain. It desensitizes children to mantra chanting and the eventual embrace of the Lotus Sutra of Nichiren Buddhism. So it's a chant, it's a series of words that they chant over and over and over again. And within this particular anime, the children are chanting these words over and over and over again. It's incessant and annoying, but they're doing this in order to gain power. And so there's a clear message of, well, we don't need to use methods of war. All we need to do is chant this over and over again. And that's part of Nichiren Buddhism, is there's a mantra that you can chant over and over and over again, and that'll bring you health, wealth, and prosperity. And that's exactly what's being taught in this anime, is that Nichiren Buddhism, the chanting, transcendental meditation, and the desensitization of your children into performing these same practices. So again, it's a prosperity gospel anime for Buddhism. And the spirits of the forest, again, focus on climate change and environmentalism. It's the spirits of the forest that create the rainbows. When we take care of the environment only, though, and when we stop taking care of the environment, the rainbows will no longer be here. Obviously, that's a clear contradiction of Christianity that teaches that God creates the rainbow, and it's a reflection of his covenant with us. What did I also had some other notes here.
The enemy continues to prowl around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he can devour.
Amen.
And 300,000 people are going to die today. Another 300,000 are going to die tomorrow. We can't reach them all. We need to be snatching one or two from the fire here and there.
Yeah.
And praying that our Lord will direct others to do the same, because that's the only way we're going to have any chance of defeating this invasion of our lives. We can't protect the world, but perhaps we can protect our own.
Yeah, it's a good segue.
Children.
Yeah, it's a good segue to the.
Children.
Yeah, it's a good segue to the little quote I have here at the bottom. It's quoted from this book, but it's a commentary that a guy named Frederick Schodt made on the Shamriko cult. But based upon what I know thus far about Soka Gakkai, it can totally be appropriate for Soka Gakkai as well. And he says that one of the cult's success was its ability to package its twisted message in an attractive fashion. They encountered blind obedience to a nearly blind guru with apocalyptic visions who was paranoid and psychotic. Anime and manga, because they are so popular, because they can be used to dramatize and exaggerate information and simplify a complex reality, and because they were often rendered in a cute, fashionable style, they were the perfect vehicle for the cult to proselytize. It's hard to imagine a more sinister abuse of the manga medium. So
I could testify to that point. I learned to like spinach because of Popeye the Sailor Man.
Yeah. So, and just to close, I just, on the last page, something, Corey was speaking to this about the whole social justice idea and where it comes from. Social justice, climate change action, critical race theory, all these things that are being pushed into our kids' heads, even as something as innocuous as you think anime is so in contrast to scripture. It's in contrast to specific verses like 1 Corinthians chapter 1, because it comes from, in most of the Western culture, it comes from Aristotelian ethics, which is communitarianism, focus on the community, focus on the state. The state is God. Aristotle was a pagan. He had a lot of good ideas, I think, on the existence of God and how we can prove the existence of God, but his idea of God and his idea of salvation were completely different than ours. So much of social justice is based in that idea, and it's contrary to 1 Corinthians. I'm going to read right out of scripture rather than from this, but if we read from 1 Corinthians chapter 1, starting verse 18, it says, "For the word of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the cleverness of the clever I will set aside. Where is the wise man? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolishness, or made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God the world through its wisdom did not come to know God." I'm going to repeat that because I like that. "For since in the wisdom of God the world through its own wisdom did not come to know God, God was well pleased through the foolishness of the message preached to save those who do believe. For indeed Jews ask for signs and Greeks search for wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified to the Jews as a stumbling block, and to Gentiles as foolishness." So,
and how appropriate it was when Paul wrote that to the Corinthians who were steeped in this paganism
yep,
and philosophies that they were trying to creep into the church, and they
Yep.
were divided because of that.
yep. And that's exactly what's going on with this paganism within our church. There is a clear delineation as to the kids who are watching anime and who are struggling in their faith and struggling in their sexual identity, and the kids who aren't. So, how else do you explain it?
Yeah.
The kids with a biblical worldview are solid, and the ones who are watching anime all day without a parental supervision are the ones who are struggling and are depressed because they are questioning their sexual identity, and I think they know in their hearts that it's wrong. So it's a real serious issue. I had no idea, again, until about 6 months ago.
I would have never guessed.
So, all right, guys. Well, I know it's
thank you.
lunchtime. Yeah, it's been good talking with you. Thank you for contributing.